didn't think much of it when I began to read When You Lose Someone You Love by Richard Exley. I picked up the book on the cheap at gospelerreads.com, and I was partly reading this book just to get it off the list of books I haven't read on my Kindle. It had been sitting on my Kindle for a couple of years, and I was also hoping to maybe gain an insight here or there on how to comfort others in their grief. I had no idea how much this book could speak to me. When You Lose Someone You Love by Richard Exley is a collection of 9 letters written from a pastor to a man named David in his church. Now, you should know that David is not a real person, but Richard Exley created a composite character to pull together all the various struggles with grief he has experienced throughout his own pastoral ministry, and to protect the stories of those who are in his church who he's helped along the way. And I see the format of this book as 9 short letters. The book itself is only 125 pages from introduction to epilogue, but 9 short letters I think are an ideal way to comfort someone throughout the grieving process. Because one thing no one wants to do after a loss is to walk through a long work on grief, overloaded with information and definitions and instructions. But reading 9 letters from a friend, I can do that. And I found all of the letters in this book to be insightful, comforting, timely, and wise. I know from walking through grief with people at my own church throughout my pastoral ministry that some of the most difficult days when you lose someone is not that time period when you're making all the preparations for the funeral and the chaos of the time immediately after the loss, but sometimes the most difficult days, usually the most difficult days, come in the weeks and the months to follow. And by reading a letter a week in this book, for 9 weeks, it provides a spread out amount of comfort for people to find regular help and hope in their time of need. It allowed me to see the value of writing letters to people in my own ministry during these times. On a personal note, my own mother passed away 2 years ago from a battle with cancer, and I found this book to be helpful to me. Richard helped me walk through some struggles that I had buried a little bit beneath the surface, but needed care and attention from a wise voice that he provided to me. This is a comforting work of grace to minister to God's children in their pain. Here are a couple of quotes to help give example of the wisdom and insight found in this book. To those who struggle with grief and they experience sorrow in a way that's different from those who are around them, Richard writes, "You may find it helpful to remember that as it is unhealthy to repress grief when you experience it, even so it is also unhealthy to manufacture sorrow when it is not there." We all need to remember that there's no playbook for grief. There's no right or wrong way to mourn a loss, and sometimes you experience it far deeper than others, and at other times the emotions just don't come up like they do in other people you may be around, and you shouldn't feel guilty because you don't experience the same sorrow as others. Then we have the simple statement on trusting in God in the midst of the confusion of grief, and that really struck home with me because I'm one of those type of people who want to be able to explain everything, and sometimes I can't. Death is not a riddle to be solved or a question to be answered. Instead, it is a mystery to be entrusted to the wisdom of God. This book is also filled with many helpful quotations from other books, other authors, and of course the wonderful quoting of scripture found throughout. I cannot recommend this book any more highly for those who have lost a loved one, but I do want to make one small point, and that is this book is clearly addressed to a Christian who is going through the grief and the loss of losing another loved one who is also in the faith. This book was not written for someone who doesn't know Jesus Christ, who doesn't have their eternal destiny secured in him. This is also not written for someone who's dealing with the particular grief of losing a loved one or a friend who never placed their faith in Jesus Christ for salvation. This book is clearly written for the specific purpose of a Christian who lost a loved one who was also a believer in Jesus Christ. And for that specific purpose, I believe this book is a home run. I loved this book on such a personal, deep level, and I highly recommend these 9 letters to you in your hour of grief. And if you know somebody else who's going through the grief process, they're struggling with it, you're not really sure what to say, well, give them a copy of Richard Exley's When You Lose Someone You Love. If you enjoyed this review, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the Rev Reads YouTube channel to stay engaged in the moving world of Christian literature.